Hello and welcome to another session on new literatures in English. In today's class, we shall discuss Volsoinka's Death and King's Horseman. I have already told you or introduced you to African literature in class, so I shall move on to the play. Okay. Now, let me give you a history of the play, which also had been done, but then it was only for the A batch. The B batch were not present at that time. So I'll just do the history of the play, the various characters, and the theme of the play. And then in the next two videos, hopefully we should be able to finish it in 3 videos. So in the next 2 videos, we shall move on to the play. Okay. This video will be completely an introductory part of Death and the King's Horseman. Now, if you look at the history of the play, Death and the King's Horseman, it draws its seed, or it draws its idea from a real event that happened in Nigeria in 1945. The Alafin, which is the Yoruban king, the Yoruban term for king, the Alafin of Oyo, Oba Sienbola Oladipolu I, died after 33-year reign. His horseman, Olakun Esin Jinadu, had led a traditionally privileged life, and the people of Oyo expected that he would carry out his duty and follow his master by a ritual suicide, which again was discussed in class. I hope you remember the tradition, the Yoruban tradition of the King's Horseman following the master after 31 days of the master's death. When Alafin died, the horseman was delivering a message in the village of Ikoyi. About 3 weeks later, he returned to Oyo, dressed himself in white and in a traditional build-up to committing suicide, and he began dancing through the streets. The British colonial officers in charge at Oyo heard of Olakun Isin's intention and ordered that the horseman should be prevented from killing himself. When word of his father's arrest reached the horseman's youngest son, Murana killed himself in place of Olakun Esin in order to fulfill the needs of the ritual. This story was told to Volsoinka in 1960 by Olivier, and it stayed at the back of his mind until one day in 1974 when he was at Churchill College, Cambridge, and he was just walking past a bust of Winston Churchill in the college. When he walked past the bust of Winston Churchill, it struck him, it just came to his mind. It was therefore written very fast and given a first reading in Cambridge itself before being performed in Nigeria on his return home. The rewriting of African myth and history in dramatic form has been a very common thing for modern African writers, and they try to find truth which is often suppressed or rather ignored in colonial and post-independence versions of African history. So it's something that the modern African writers often do. They rewrite the African myth and history in a dramatic form. And Soinka has freely reinterpreted the story while keeping close to its major events in order to explore his ideas on leadership, tradition, and the gulf between people. Okay? So now let's move on to the characters of the story. Ellison is the main character, the protagonist of the story, of the play. Ellison is the King's Horseman. This title carries with it considerable honor, which enables the man, whoever that person is, the king's horseman, the holder, he gets to live a very important position, or a very luxurious life, and also a very important position in the society. He gets to live as a great chief, to be precise. Ellison has been the king's close friend and advisor, and he was given all worldly goods he could desire, and he enjoyed the love of many women. Now this title, which is also hereditary, now it is to pass on. Okay, so the title which is hereditary also carries with it one very important duty. The horseman must enter a trance and willingly and willfully die in order to lead his master through the dangerous passage between the world of the living and that of the ancestors. By willfully encountering death in full knowledge of what he does, what the horseman does is, the horseman effectively nullifies, invalidate, or cancel out the power of death over his people, over the Yoruban people. And he maintains the link between the different states of being essential for the well-being of the Yoruba world. I also told you about the 3 states in Yoruban culture. The Ellison we meet is a man full of vitality and love of life. He relishes all earthly pleasures, and it is typical of him that he chooses to leave the world, or to take his leave of the world, to die. He's going to die, and he wants to leave the world in the place that he loves the most, the marketplace. The marketplace, which is the center of worldly goods, commerce, and engagement. So Ellison, from this itself, we get an idea of his nature. He is in love with the worldly goods, the materialistic life. He has everything he wanted. He is also full of self-confidence, and he boasts that he alone has no fear of death. Many commentators on Death and King's Horseman have pointed out Olonde's role as a mouthpiece for the playwright Volvo Soyinka. But Ellison also represents Soyinka in significant ways. Just like Soyinka, he has tremendous presence and great gifts for words. His language is so powerful. He's intelligent, and that can be seen in the first scene itself when he gives the parable of the not-I bird. In Ellison, we see a man who thought he had control of his will, but who finally did not. This failure of his central duty, because of his personal weakness, destroys Ellison, which also puts the whole Yoruban world in peril. Now, he is supposed to take a very important step. He is supposed to his death, that is his willful suicide, is actually a duty that he has to perform as a horseman to the king. And for this, he has to enter a trance, and he must not get weakened, or he must not get tempted by the worldly aspects or the earthly materialistic aspects of life. Ellison is a man who is greedy. He is a man who loves women, who loves luxury, who loves fine clothing, who loves good food. And everyone, that is the praisinger, yolaha, whom you will meet very soon, who is the market woman, and everyone knows his weakness, and they all warn him, and they want him to be to be more involved in his spiritual duty. Okay, and however, Ellison fails. He gets tempted by several things, and he is unable to perform his ritual or perform the ritual, and his son Olonde takes over, and he commits, or he takes this duty of reaching the master or the king in his afterlife. That is, Olonde commits suicide for Ellison, because Ellison has failed in his duty, and therefore Ellison has put the whole Yoruban world in peril. To save the Yoruban world, Olonde comes forward. Olonde, his son, comes forward, and he takes his own life. And Ellison is ashamed, and he has to live a life of shame. Unable to bear the shame, Ellison commits suicide, a violent suicide. But this is not going to help him, because he knows very well that in his afterlife he's going to face the same disgrace and dishonor in his ancestors, or when he gets to his ancestors. He will reach his ancestors late, and he will find that his son, who took his life, who did his duty, who performed his duty, will be given a very important place, and he will have to eat the bones that is thrown to him by his own son. And when he travels along, or when after his death, when he travels along that path, he will have to, or the passage is clogged with droppings from the king's stallion, and he will arrive in the ancestors, or he will arrive at the place where the ancestors are, all stained in tongue. Okay, but Ellison kills himself because he cannot bear to live with his shame, and must at least atone, or at least attempt to atone for his betrayal of the community. So this is a very, Ellison Oba is a very engaging character, and it is, I told you in class that also Inca uses this, or in most of the African plays, you will find that these African writers, they use it to bring out the social and political problems that they face in Nigeria. So what we see clearly in African theatre, both old as well as new, is that there is no concept of art purely for aesthetic reasons. It's not just for entertainment purpose. It serves a ritual, it serves religious purposes, and also it is socially and politically committed. Okay, how it could also be a debate on how African societies should be run, and how African people should embrace their culture, and so on. Okay, so if you look at the outcome of the play, Death and the King's Horseman, seems to argue that at least the very least that a man can do is to have a balance. And to have such a balance, it is difficult to maintain, and attachment to material pleasure is likely to corrupt the will and endanger the society. So it's like a kind of warning to the corrupt officers of Nigeria, to the corrupt corrupt politicians. Soyinka has written about so often. The corrupting dangers of power and prestige are very clearly spelled out by Soyinka by using myth and history to bring before the readers the contemporary world of Nigeria. So if you look at Ellison actually represents most of the corrupt politicians of Nigeria. So it serves, it's not just aesthetic purpose alone. African theatre is not just aesthetic purpose or entertainment purpose alone. It is socially and politically committed. The plays are socially and politically committed. We discussed all this in the class. Okay. And the next very important character is Yolaha. Yolaha is, in Soyinka's words, the mother of the market women in West African society. They're very, very powerful people. In many West African towns and villages, the market has been, and even now it is, the center of all earthly life and commerce. It is the place where life is. So if you look at Ellison is always in the marketplace. So he enjoys, that's what the praisinger, when you come to the play, you will find the praisinger often warning him of being in the marketplace, because marketplace is a place where there is bubbling of life, there is life. It is a metaphor for life. Whereas Ellison is about to do something or commit something that needs him to stay away from this center of life. He's going to take his own life. So he has to move into a trance to get himself committed to do his duty, to do his spiritual duty. So coming back to Yolaha, this trade in African societies, this trade is often controlled by women, and they are the most successful and very wealthy and very influential class. As mother of the market, we may presume that Yolaha is one of these wealthy and powerful women. So, like Ellison, Yolaha is also a traditionalist. Ellison is also a traditionalist, and he has very little understanding of the colonial world. In fact, he hates the colonial world. He hates the Britishers, and he considers English education and the Western civilization as intruding into the European culture. Just like that, here also you have Yolaha, who is a traditionalist, and she has very little knowledge of the colonial world, and in fact very less use of it also. And she scorns at the colonial pride, and she constantly makes fun of the European officers, especially Pilgrims. She calls him a child. She honors Ellison as the upholder of the traditions and balance of Yoruba world, and therefore she is ready to do anything for him, which does not transgress the rules of the European world. However, this powerful woman also knows Ellison very well. She knows how Ellison is tempted by the worldly things, and how he is tempted by women, how much he loves women. See, polygamy is something that is very common in African culture. And here you have an instance where Yolaha's son is betrothed to a beautiful woman, and Ellison, who catches sight of her, falls in love with her, and he wants her. Before he dies, he wants to enjoy her, so he wants her to be his bride, and thereby have a child in her. And we did discuss about this also in the class. I told you about how important it is to the Yoruban culture to have children, as many children as possible, because only the children can connect that path between the ancestors and the living world. So here also you will find that he has many wives. He has many children, and he falls in love with this girl who's very young and very beautiful. He wants her. Yolaha cannot do anything because this man is about to perform a very important ritual for the whole community, and therefore she cannot disagree to it. And she, though does not like it, though she's hesitant, she gives his son's bride to Ellison as his bride. But what happens is Ellison, when he fails in his duty, when he fails in his ritual duty, it is Yolaha's scorn that he must face. Yolaha, who brings his son to the Horseman, she is the upholder of Yoruban values, and she also has there are several moments in the especially in the final section of the play, where she's more powerful, and she can even order the European officers to step back from intruding into the European traditions. When Ellison dies, or Yolaha's son's to-be bride, who is now Ellison's wife, performs a ritual. Pilgrims come forward to take the body, and Yolaha, she ensures that she can even order Pilgrims back from interfering with Ellison's body, and ensure that the bride, as the vessel of future hope, carries out her prescribed role. Yolaha asserts her will as a matriarch over the market women, and she also asserts this power over large part of the community as well. She enjoys her power, but unlike Ellison, she never thinks she can transgress the fundamental rules which underpin the Yoruba world, just unlike Ellison does. Another important character in the play is a praisinger. Ellison's praisinger is a very important member of the Horseman's journey. A great chief will always be surrounded by advisors, servants, and praisinger is one of them. The griot, or the praisinger, has a very historic role in West African societies. He's an entertainer, he's an oral historian, a storyteller, as well as a praisinger. He accompanies a great man and sings of his power and his duties. The relationship between Ellison and his praisinger is a close one, a very close one. You will find them joking and speaking a lot of proverbs, metaphorical things. They are both beautiful artists. Ellison and the praisinger are wonderful artists, and both of them revel in each other's talents. The praisinger has great love and admiration for Ellison. He also wants to join Ellison in his afterlife, but unfortunately, the praisinger has an independent life. Has no independent life. He cannot join his master in his afterlife. He has to stay back and sing praise of his master. After Ellison's projected triumphant death, the praisinger is supposed to stay behind to continue singing the Horseman's praises. So, just like Yolaha, the praisinger also knows Ellison's weakness for earthly things, especially for women. And he says, beware, they love to spoil you, but beware, the hands of women also weaken the unwary. That's what he says. So, the praisinger, in scene 3, who guides and facilitates Ellison's trance and his journey towards the passage between the states of being. It is he who facilitates Ellison's trance. The 3 states of being, remember the 3 states of being that I told you about in Yoruban culture? The one yet to be born, the living and the dead. Yes, that's very important in Yoruban culture. And his the final oration of the praisinger is a wonderful recitative, helping us to understand Ellison's journey and expressing the singer's great love for his master. In the final scene, the praisinger's reproaches are added to yolahas. But unlike yolaha, the praisinger speaks more in grief than in anger. Yolaha speaks in grief when Ellison fails in his duty. Yolaha scorns and speaks in anger. But here the praisinger, on the other hand, he speaks. When he speaks, he reproaches, but his reproach is because of his grief. He had offered to help Ellison on the way, but Ellison had been too proud and so has failed and upset the order of the Yoruban world. The praisinger speaks in the voice of a betrayed lover whose beloved has been found to have feet of clay. Next important character is Olonde. Olonde is the son of eldest son of Ellison, and he is the inheritor of the power and duties of the king's horseman. That means after Ellison's death, this title, as I told you, the horseman's title is hereditary. It has to pass on to the next generation, and Olonde is the inheritor of this power and duties. As a member of the younger generation, like the market women's daughters, Olonde has come into more contact with the white colonials than other major Nigerian characters, especially through his education. We talked about this, how colonization and how the introduction or how English education, introducing of the English education, the Christian missionaries made a change in the lives of the younger generation, Nigerian generation. So you will find the older generation, as in Yolaha, in Ellison, the traditionals, the praisinger, and so on. But the younger generation, that is Olonde and the market women's daughters, you will find them belonging to the younger generation, which is more in contact with the white colonials. Okay. And this was a common experience during colonial period, when children might go to mission schools or government colleges which promoted white values and culture, and often created a gap, a divorce in understanding between the older and younger generation, a generation gap, because the older generation, they were traditionals. They held their Yoruban culture and tradition to their core, but the younger generations questioned some of the rituals. Olonde is obviously an intelligent young man. In the past, he dared create a rift with his father, which he sought Pilkins' help to go to England and train as a doctor. Ellison and Pilkins both think this means that Olonde has turned his back on Yoruban world and accepted white values. Both Ellison, as well as his father Ellison, and Pilkins thought that he was successful in getting Olonde to shun away from the Yoruban world, or to accept and embrace the white culture and white values or the civilization. The immediate visual impression of Olonde conforms, of course, to such expectations, as because he is dressed in European suit. So even the readers feel that, okay, Olonde has completely moved away from the traditions and has accepted white culture. However, the readers are wrong, because we quickly learn that Olonde has returned in order to carry out his duties as eldest son after the death of his father, because Ellison is about to do a very important ritual. And after this tradition, as I told you, this is hereditary. This title is hereditary. And therefore, being the eldest son, he has to come back, or he has come back to carry out his duties as the eldest son after the death of his father. Because Olonde still honors his father and also the traditional customs. Pilgrims thought that he was able to instill in him the white values and white culture. Olonde, or contrary to Pilgrims' expectations, Olonde has not rejected European tradition. Instead, he has used his time in Britain to further his understanding of the white races. That understanding does not reflect favorably on whites, with a few honorable exceptions, of course. Few people alone he likes, just with the exception of few people. Others, he was there in Britain to study the white culture. And in fact, it does not hold, the white culture does not hold any good in him, or any positive things in him. Olonde is actually horrified by the white hypocrisies and lies, and most of all by the arrogance which the white people has as a superior race towards others. So Olonde alone, of all the characters in the play, understands both Yoruba and British societies. He is often seen as the mouthpiece for Soyinka's views. That's why I told you in the beginning, some of the critics believes that he is the mouthpiece of all Soyinka. He has certainly made a similar journey to that of Soyinka, who also was educated in both Nigeria and England, and who is happy to make use of what he has learned from the white world while remaining deeply Yoruba and inspired, as he says, by a Yoruba muse, the muse of poetry, Yoruban culture. It is unfortunate that Olonde comes across a slightly wooden prick without the vibrant personality of other characters in the play. Finally, Olonde asserts his fundamental allegiances by taking his father's place. And as King's horseman, because his father fails in his duty, because Ellison has brought dishonor, he comes forward and takes the duty as King's horseman. He takes his own life. It is highly symbolic that Olonde is a doctor. He understands the ills of both societies and attempts to heal the sickness brought about by his father's failure by giving his own life instead. Even being a doctor, he has his traditions, his belief systems. His father's failure of not doing his duty, committing to his duty, which brought dishonor to the whole community and put them in peril, he comes forward to heal the sickness. So in a metaphorical way, being a doctor, he heals the sickness of the Yoruban world that his father brought about, the sickness that the father brought about. Okay, so that's one important character of the play. Another important character is Amusa. Sergeant Amusa is a native administration of policeman, and he is not employed by the British government, but he is locally appointed. Leadership. There is a this was the lowest form of police force in colonial Nigeria. Amusa is not a Yoruba and he is Muslim. This is important in the play. Pilkings has thought that Amusa was better than most Africans because he is not part of Yoruba. Yoruba being a pagan society. Amusa being a Muslim, Pilkings thought that he was civilized. However, Amusa too is profoundly shocked by Pilkings' wearing of the Egungun costumes as fancy dress. His sense of the sacred is outraged by this light treatment of the Yoruba religious mass, and he refuses to talk to the Pilgrims while they are dressed in such garb. That's what I told you about the traditions. Whatever we are, whether we are Christians or Hindus or Muslims, we hold dear our traditions. Our traditions are ingrained in us. The Pilgrims see this behavior as ridiculous, but Soyinka uses the scene to demonstrate Simon Pilking's utter disregard for the religious sensibilities. Throughout the play, Amusa is a source of light relief. We later meet him in the marketplace where he attempts to arrest Ellison. He is in no match for the wit of the market women and their daughters. As one who fully inhabits neither the Yoruba nor the white world, Amusa is generally seen as a white man's lackey who has sold his manhood to serve the colonists. He is therefore accorded very little respect by either sides. Another important character is Joseph. Joseph is the Pilking's houseboy. African men are commonly referred to as boys when they were household servants, no matter what was their age or what their age was. Unlike any of the other Yoruba people, we meet Joseph as a Christian convert. He has turned his back on Yoruba practices, but this does not mean Simon Pilkings accords him any more respect than any other African. Even though he has become a Christian, the white man still sees him as an African. The white man still sees himself as superior. We discussed that superior feeling in Derek Walcott's A Far Cry from Africa, remember? Indeed, he offends Joseph just as much as he does Amusa, but this time by casting scorn on Joseph's Catholic beliefs. Joseph has rather more dignity than Amusa and possibly more education, but he has also symbolically lost his manhood by accepting European rules and culture and becoming forever a boy. Next is Simon Pilkings. As a British district officer, Pilkings is responsible for maintaining order throughout his district. He must decide what to do about Ellison's suicide, which is against the law. Even though what Ellison is about to do is a ritual, to the white man it is nothing more than a suicide. He is utterly certain that British values are superior to anything else the world may have to offer, and he therefore has very little interest in learning anything about European culture. He's not interested at all. So this you see both in Ellison also. Ellison and the yolaha, they're both not interested in understanding the white man's world. Whereas Olonde understands both the worlds. Likewise, Pilkins also. He is being in Yoruba or being in Nigeria, being in a place where Yoruban culture is very important. He has little interest in learning anything about it. Pilkings is shallow and very conventional. Moreover, he has little real understanding of his own culture also. He mocks Christianity as freely as he does paganism or Islam, and his prime concern for much of the play is to impress the prince at the fancy dress ball by wearing and displaying his Egungun costume. Pilkings learns nothing in the course of this play. He can be seen as a caricature of several expatriates in Africa, even today, who behave very similarly to Simon Pilkings, or he is a caricature of several such Europeans. Now next you have Jane Pilkings. Jane Pilkings is rather more sympathetic version of her husband. She also wears an Egungun costume with no regard at all and like her husband is vastly excited at the thought of meeting the prince. However, she does try to curb her husband's wilder excess of insensitivity. She urges compromise over upsetting Amusa and also Joseph's religious beliefs, and she listens even if she learns very little to Olonde's views on Yoruba and Western culture. She tries to understand, but she is not able to grasp many things, but she at least makes an attempt to understand from Olonde the Yoruban culture. She is more sensible than her husband, but is equally bound by a set of narrow values. She cannot even understand the significance of her own story about the captain who sacrificed himself for the greater good of society, and she is utterly shocked by Olonde's calm attitude at his father's intended sacrifice. That is because she is not able to understand the European culture. Alright, so this much is for the characters of the play. The themes of the play I shall discuss in detail once we complete the play. So thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video. We'll start the play in the next video. Thank you.